Hey there, movie fans. Scott MovieMantz here with a new installment of the MovieMantz Double-Feature. Now, on the MovieMantz Double-Feature, I like to take two films that are related for obvious reasons, not so obvious reasons, put them together and make my case for why they would make the perfect double feature. Real excited for this installment because I am pairing, are you ready? Are you ready? 1968's 2001 A Space Odyssey and 1979's Star Trek The Motion Picture. Up first is 2001 A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. Release date is April 3rd, 1968. Budget around $10.5 to $12 million. Domestic gross $60.5 million. That includes all the different re-releases over the years. Worldwide gross $146 million, also includes re-releases. An Oscar winner for Best Visual Effects. 3 additional Oscar nominations for Best Director Stanley Kubrick, Adapted Screenplay, and Art and Set Direction. Up next is Star Trek The Motion Picture, directed by Robert Wise. Release date December 7th, 1979. Budget $44 million. Domestic gross $82.6 million. Worldwide gross $139 million. 3 Academy Award nominations for Best Score, Best Visual Effects, and Art and Set Direction. So why do these two movies go together perfectly? Well, let's start with the fact that both of these films represent science fiction at their very finest. I mean, of course, 2001 A Space Odyssey is one of the greatest movies ever made, and it got very mixed reviews when it first came out in 1968. It's a thought-provoking, very cerebral, and some would say slow-moving film as well, but you got to surrender yourself to it. It took many years for me to wrap my head around the scope and the ambition and the boldness of 2001 A Space Odyssey. But the more I see it, the more I love it. And I have done everything I can to drop what I'm doing to see this movie whenever it is playing on the big screen, because that is how you see 2001 A Space Odyssey. Now, I have been a massive Star Trek fan ever since I first discovered Star Trek in syndication in the early 70s. So when I saw Star Trek The Motion Picture on opening day, December 7th, 1979, I fell in love with it immediately. Now, reviews were mixed, and so was the fan reaction, but I think the motion picture has aged better than any other Star Trek film. No other Star Trek movie looks quite like the motion picture. And the more I think about the motion picture, the more I've seen the motion picture, the more I've come to realize that the motion picture captures the spirit of Star Trek more than any other Star Trek movie. Now, after Star Trek became a huge hit in syndication, Paramount Pictures went back and forth on reviving Star Trek, either as a new TV series, as a TV movie, or even a feature film. They finally went into production on a second TV series called Star Trek Phase 2. They built sets, they had costume tests, but after Star Wars came out in 1977 and basically changed everything, Paramount fast-tracked Star Trek as a big budget and soon to be over budget feature film. And when it finally opened, everybody expected the motion picture to be Star Trek's answer to Star Wars. What they got was a film that was Star Trek's answer to 2001 A Space Odyssey. Yeah, it was slow-moving. I don't mind it, but some people call it out for being slow-moving. But it was provocative and it was cerebral. And Star Trek is a film that gets better with repeated viewings. And it's much better now than it was back in 1979 when it first came out. Then there's the score. Now, when I first saw Star Trek The Motion Picture on December 7th, 1979 as a little kid, the thing that I immediately loved about it the most was the score composed by Jerry Goldsmith. He was nominated for it, but it's the best of all the Star Trek scores and one of the best scores of all time. So what's the connection between Goldsmith and Star Trek in 2001 A Space Odyssey? Well, this is an interesting story. Now, the soundtrack for 2001 is composed and comprised of classical music. We all know that. But originally, Stanley Kubrick asked Alex North, who composed the scores for Spartacus and Doctor Strangelove, to compose a score for 2001. But in the end, Kubrick decided to use the classical music, and it wasn't until 1993 that North's friend and colleague Jerry Goldsmith created a commercial recording of Alex North's score for 2001, which was commercially released on CD in 2007. So there's the connection between Jerry Goldsmith and 2001 and Star Trek the Motion Picture. Really interesting. Then there's visual effects. Now, the creation of the groundbreaking and trailblazing visual effects for 2001 A Space Odyssey broke every rule in the book, and that is why the movie still looks ahead of its time more than 50 years later. And one of the special photographic effects supervisors was Douglas Trumbull, who was in his mid-20s when he worked with Kubrick on 2001. More than a decade later, when Star Trek the Motion Picture ran into visual effects problems, they spent more than $5 million on visual effects for footage that was largely unusable, and the company that created those visual effects, Abel and Associates, was removed from the motion picture. Replacing them was Douglas Trumbull, who rushed to finish the visual effects in time for the motion picture's December 7th, 1979 release, and he took what he learned while making 2001 to capture the beauty of space, which also gave that movie the feel of 2001 A Space Odyssey. Finally, there is evolution. What is 2001 really about? Well, it's not about a computer that kills most of its crew, although that does happen. 2001 A Space Odyssey is about the history of human consciousness. Now, when the monolith is first discovered by the primitive humans on Earth, it's buried on the moon and discovered again 6 million years later by astronauts. And if humanity can trace the beam from the monolith on the moon to the bigger monolith to Jupiter and get to that monolith in Jupiter, then it will be worthy in the next step of its evolution. So what is Star Trek the Motion Picture really about? Well, the Enterprise crew has to stop V'Ger from destroying the Earth. But when Kirk, Spock, and McCoy realize that V'Ger is a child and V'Ger wants to join with its creator, that's when the story flips over into something really beautiful and sublime. And when Decker and Ilia merge and Kirk, Spock, and McCoy make it safely back to the Enterprise, that's when they discover that they realized and they just saw and witnessed the creation of a new life form and possibly the next step of human evolution. So just like 2001 A Space Odyssey was about evolution, so does Star Trek the Motion Picture follow that same theme of evolution. So what do you think? You agree? You disagree? Comment below. Tell me what you think of my theories about why 2001 A Space Odyssey and Star Trek the Motion Picture would make the perfect MovieMantz double feature. Please like this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And please check out my other show, Rank and File. The latest episode of Rank and File, I ranked all 10 films directed by Quentin Tarantino. So do check that out. And until next time, here's looking at you, kid.